Hello again. I would like to spend the next 20 minutes or so going over two things. Some of what we think of as Cornell's key values, and a brief overview of academic integrity. Let me start with our core values. Our first value, and these, by the way, are values that you can think of them as guiding principles for all activity at Cornell. I think we all have values individually. We hold certain values. We don't all share the same values, but implicitly or explicitly, these values sort of guide our behavior throughout life. And Cornell has the same thing, right? It has these values. They serve as guiding principles for the community, and Cornell has made a point to make them explicit so that we can all sort of refer back to them when in doubt as to how to proceed. The first value has to do with purposeful discovery. In other words, we value the process of discovery through learning, teaching, scholarship, and innovation, striving with integrity for excellence and purpose. And these values, by the way, you can find online. They're available to anybody. If you just sort of look up Cornell values, you will easily be able to find them. The second value, and I will circle back to this one at the end because I want to make a point here. But the second value is free and open inquiry and expression. We value free and open inquiry and expression. These are tenets that underlie academic freedom, even of ideas that some may find wrong or offensive. I'll come back to this one in a second. The third value has to do with a community of belonging. As a university founded to be a place where any person can find instruction, we value diversity and inclusion, and we strive to be welcoming, caring, and equitable in community. Fourth value has to do with the exploration across boundaries. Right? We value the importance of all academic disciplines and celebrate the power of connections among them. Fifth, changing lives through public engagement. We value engagement in our community, our state, and the broader world, learning about their needs and strengths, and applying the knowledge we create for the benefit of society. And six, respect for the natural environment. And we value our role in advancing solutions for a sustainable future, and we recognize the close relationship between people and the earth, acting in ways to live and work sustainably. So, again, you can think of these as guiding principles. Maybe right now you can think, well, they all seem straightforward, sure, I already live by them, that's wonderful. But often what happens is that we find ourselves in maybe situations in which we are not quite sure how to proceed. And hopefully these can be a reference for you as well in terms of knowing how to move forward. But let me, as I said, circle back to the second one, sort of this free and open inquiry and expression. We are a community whose very purpose is the pursuit of knowledge, right? That is the purpose of the academic community that Cornell is. So we value free and open inquiry and expression. And as I said, these are tenets that underlie academic freedom, even of ideas that some may consider wrong or offensive. And inherent in this commitment, by the way, is the corollary freedom to engage in reasoned opposition to messages to which one objects. Reasoned opposition to messages in which one objects. Okay. So something to think about. I mean, this is easier said than done, right? Some of these principles are, they're meant to guide our behavior, but sometimes, when we're engaging someone with opposing views or opposing ideas, it can be difficult to maintain maybe a civil dialogue. But this is essential for the advancement of knowledge and the exchange of ideas. If you have any questions about these values, at any point, feel free to get in touch with us. The second part that I wanted to go over with you has to do with academic integrity. This is a quote from Cornell's Code of Academic Integrity. It says, "The values most essential to an academic community are grounded on the concept of honesty with respect to the intellectual efforts of oneself and others." So academic integrity is central to what we do at Cornell. And one of the reasons is because we can think of academic integrity as fairness to oneself and to others. Right? So we can think of taking others' ideas perhaps as stealing. Right? We're stealing ideas. And there are many ways in which this can take form. We can think of maybe not giving proper credit, right? Whether it's paraphrasing or using direct quotes. Maybe engaging in collaborative work when the assignment is meant to be an individual assignment, or copying a problem set, whether it's online or from another student, unduly relying on technology during exams when instructions are explicit that we shouldn't, right? Perhaps reproducing or selling course material. These are all examples of ways in which we are, in essence, engaging in stealing. Right? So we're not stealing physical objects, we're not stealing a computer, we're not stealing an iPhone, we are stealing intellectual property. Now, you may say, well, come on, you're just welcoming us to Cornell, and now you're telling us about this sort of bad thing that can happen, and I should just say that the reason why we go over this now is because, at least in my experience, many of the violations of academic integrity are very, very preventable. Right? They're often situations that come about not because of malice, but sometimes because of ignorance, and other times just because of really poor time management and other considerations. Right? So this is meant to help you. And here I have a few examples of ways in the particular context of, say, not acknowledging other people's work, ways in which we could do that are fairly straightforward, right? So we can use language along the lines of, I agree with blank, or as blank has argued, or according to some critics, this and that, right? Or any language, perhaps in a footnote, that embodies sort of a sense of debt to the origin of the idea. Right? This explanation is a close paraphrase of blank, and perhaps include the pages there. Or I have used the examples discussed by blank. The main steps in my discussion were suggested by blank's treatment of the problem. Or although the examples are my own, my categories are derived from blank. These are only a few examples. Depending on your field of study, text in this form may be what you work with, or it may be images, it may be code, it may be other forms of, let's say, text broadly understood. But this applies to all forms. And when I say that this applies to all forms, I mean it in the sense that this is already applying to all of us. The second we arrive at Cornell, we are bound by this code of academic integrity. So it's important to get to know it. It's not only binding us during coursework, it's binding us all the time. Let me give you just a sense of what happens, a little bit of the consequences. I served for the last 3 years as part of the College of Arts and Sciences Academic Integrity Board. This is a board that every college has, and it includes members that are faculty and members that are students, so student representatives as well. And basically, cases of violations of academic integrity are brought before this board. And I have to tell you, it is not a fun job. Right? Many of the cases that are brought before the board are fairly serious, and the consequences pretty dire. And I've seen even students that have been expelled. So this is sort of a plea for you not to find yourselves in that situation, to become familiar with the Code of Academic Integrity. But what happens? What is the process? Let's say if an instructor has reason to believe that a violation has occurred, there's a primary hearing between the student and the instructor. They discuss the case. If there's no resolution, Then there is a second hearing that goes beyond the instructor. At this point, the student cannot drop the course. In other words, it's not possible to say, well, I'm being accused of an academic integrity violation, I will just drop the course and that's it. That is not an option. If the first hearing is not successful in finding a resolution, then it moves on to this broader Board of Academic Integrity, and there's a decision. The student presents the case, the instructor presents the case, and the board reaches a decision as to whether the student is found in violation or not, and what the recommended consequences or outcome might be. As you can imagine, this takes an intense emotional toll on everyone, right? It's certainly the student, the instructor, classmates, and so on. And it can have significant consequences for someone's career. So I think it's really important to not only become familiar with the code, but also just to do a few things that are, I think, important steps that we can always try to engage in throughout our time here at Cornell and beyond. One has to do with just making sure the expectations are clear. Like I said, many violations happen, not because we want to violate the code, but because there is maybe the expectations aren't quite clear. But it is upon us to ask, right? Am I allowed, for example, to collaborate in an assignment with my peers? Or am I expected to do this by myself? Can I go online and look up how others have done this code? Or am I expected to do that by myself? How to attribute ideas correctly, right? Become familiar with citation practices. I think most faculty won't have a problem with which citation style you use as long as you use it consistently and correctly. But time management is also key here. I'm sure a lot of what I'm saying right now will sound straightforward, right? I mean, who would do that? But the reality is that when we find ourselves under extreme pressure, under perhaps competing commitments from different courses, from extracurricular activities, and so on, and we may be tempted then to say, well, I mean, I normally wouldn't do this, but I'm just going to maybe copy this assignment or go online and find the answers to this problem set. And it really has to do with this time pressure, with time management. So if you're falling behind, please ask for help. Make sure you recognize some of these early signs of stress so that you can ask for help before you find yourself in a similar situation. And please keep the big picture in mind, right? There is an importance, I see it important to recognize that there's growth in failing, in a way, sort of failing, right? There's quite a bit of intellectual growth from struggling through problems, even if we can't get the answers right, as opposed to, copying or borrowing this content from someone else. And when I say to keep the big picture in mind, what I mean is that it certainly is better to say not turn in that assignment to get not a great grade on a particular assignment or problem set or test, rather than compromise the semester's grade and potentially have this on your transcript. As I said, the stakes are pretty high. I have here some resources for you to become familiar with. These slides will be available online. You'll be able to have them. If you want to take a picture of it now, that's fine too. But make sure you take a look and you become familiar with them. Cornell has in one of these tutorials, for example, it's a brief sort of test that you can do just to see how familiar you are with these practices, and at the same time learn if you find that there are practices that maybe you weren't familiar with, then you can learn how to cite properly, how to acknowledge people's work, and so on. Same with citation styles and some general guidelines regarding academic integrity. And there's an actual booklet out there that you can get a hold of. Some of this you may see again in some of your specific colleges or programs orientations, and that's great. But if not, this is also something that is available online. If you just look up Cornell's Academic Integrity Code, you'll get sort of the PDF of this booklet. So make sure you have it. If at any point you have any questions, before you find yourselves in these situations, ask the TA. Ask the professor, ask the instructor, ask us, ask somebody to help. And it's perfectly fine, right? This is why we are here. It is to learn how to go about doing things. I'm going to stop here. Brandon, will we have time for maybe a question or two? I don't know how we're doing on time. Okay, so perhaps any questions, any thoughts? I know everybody's too scared now to say anything. Yes? Okay, thank you for that question. The question is there any software available to, say, detect plagiarism? So the software that I've seen, I don't know if this is sort of the official software, but the software that I've seen a lot of faculty at Cornell use is called Turnitin. This software helps, at least when it comes to text, written text, it helps recognize similarities in just a wealth of text from books and essays and dissertations and theses that the software compares your text. So it'll identify down to the 2 or 3 words that were strung together that might come from a different source, or an entire paragraph, or perhaps a page, if anybody has engaged in that type of copying or plagiarism. So you will typically see that in a syllabus where it says, assignments that are turned in will be submitted through Turnitin, and then you'll sort of get a notice of that form, right? So keep that in mind, right? Ideally, we would all just know not to engage in this practice regardless, but there are some tools that, on top of everything, might help instructors just sort of realize whether this is going on or not. Thank you for that. Other thoughts or questions? And again, if you're saying, well, I'm in computer science or I'm in art history, think of ways in which this applies, right? When you're presenting, when you're discussing a picture, an image, a painting, and so on, or when it comes to code, and I think, just reading the news issues of intellectual property in software have become fairly salient, and you read about these lawsuits and so on. So you can think of just this applying to many forms of media. But not only in terms of plagiarism. Think of this as just more broadly the honesty that we should just have as an overarching guiding principle, as a key value that we should hold as we move around. And we sometimes, in our systems at home, different things might count as permissive practices when it comes to academic citations, for example. So it's important to become familiar with the ones that we have here at Cornell in the United States, so that we're not surprised then if there's this disconnect between what we thought was okay to do and what it turns out is okay to do. All right. If at any point you have any questions about this, please do get in touch. Get in touch with us, get in touch with your instructors. Your instructions will have a better sense of exactly what the assignment requires, what the expectations are. Ask. It's perfectly fine to ask. Ask before it happens. Don't wait until you have to confront one of these situations. All right? I will end here, but I just want to wish you the best of luck in your start of the semester. And again, I hope to see many of you, if not all, along the way. Take care. Thank you.